How's it going, everyone? In the first round of the Bilbao Chess Masters Final, Hikaru Nakamura won as black over world champion Magnus Carlsen. The first win for the American Grandmaster in said matchup and the subject of our game of the day. Now, as we get into the nitty-gritty details of this game and a very sharp middle game, I want to address one, I think, misconception right away. There was much speculation both on social media and by those in the press room that Carlsen's interesting move order here that you can see was perhaps played as a means to avoid preparation that he's already doing for the World Championship match and might even be a little bit dubious, some calling it into question. I don't agree at all. I think that this opening is a very good one. White did have an edge in the middle game of this game at some point. And this position was actually played by Levon Aronian against Sasha Grishuk in our own Grandmaster Blitz Battles Championship in April multiple times. Aronian played the move castles once, as you can see Komodo suggest. He also played the move d4 that Carlsen did this game twice. And though in this position Aronian played the move h3 and we had a couple different games, that's not the subject of this video. I'll just say that this position has been played by top Grandmasters and it will be played again. After castles, and then the move b3, now Carlsen is playing something a little bit off the beaten path. Moves like a4, preventing b5, moves like h3, guarding the g4 square. These are a little bit more common in the database if you look it up, and perhaps the more principled moves. b3 makes sense though. The double fianchetto has intentions of getting his bishop to the diagonal to challenge the dragon beast on g7. After knight to c6, black wants to open for tactics. Of course, takes, and then bishop b2 is going to be played. No one's blundering pieces in this game. But queen a5, followed by knight a4, bishop g4, queen e1. This position sets a very common plan and a very common struggle of this type of structure in motion. Let me elaborate on that. After the move queen h5, black is making his intentions clear. He wants to attack the king on g1. As we can see, he's highlighted. Bishop f3, bishop h3, maybe the knight comes into g4 at some point. His intentions are evil and they are dirty against the white king. But white is still a little bit better here. And if white executes his plan in this type of race position, he should be a little better. White normally wants to strike with the move e5 in this position. Whenever you have a kingside fianchetto against an open Sicilian, e5 is almost always a common tactic that should be on white's radar. Of course, when you combine that with the fact that the c6 pawn might be weak, the a6 pawn is isolated, the b6 square is kind of open to this knight, these are all things that say that white should be a little bit better. And if Carlsen had played e5, taken, and then traded queens on e5, he would have been a little bit better. The dragon right above me agrees. We have a weak c6 pawn, a weak a6 pawn, potentially open squares for the knight. White should be a little bit better, and that's probably what Carlsen wishes he had done. Now, note should be that e5 is not played with the intention of taking on c6 with the bishop, as after rook to c8 and then the very nice e4 where that pawn is untouchable, black might actually be inviting himself to dinner here, and those are some unwanted in-laws on white's kingside. So, in this position, Carlsen didn't play e5, but if he had done so and exchanged queens, would have been a little better. Instead, he played the move f3, a plan that he sets in motion with aggressive intentions against black's queen. You can already see that he must have calculated all these moves as soon as he plays rook to d1. The idea is very clear. He wants to play bishop to c1 and expose black's queen on h6. The only other option that Nakamura might have had other than what he did would have been to take on g2, and then play queen to g5, opening up squares to the queen, but probably allowing a move like h4 with tempo, and white's still a little bit better. Instead, Nakamura decided to meet this interesting idea against his queen with an aggressive move of his own. He played the move g5, very interesting. Now, after bishop to c1, he trades and then gets the queen off of this dangerous diagonal. This is a position that probably still should have had Nakamura trying toward equality if Carlsen once again plays the right plan. Hikaru told me on Skype after the game that he thought that not only was f3 not as good as e5, as we've already analyzed earlier, but in this position, Nakamura thought that Carlsen should have played the move knight to b6, followed by knight to c4. In this way, he's indirectly preventing the move d5. Why? Well, d5 can be met by knight e5, and that queen on g6 is not having a good time. With this position, you can see that white has the space advantage. Moves like h5 by black can be met by h3, holding down the kingside solidly. Carlsen should be a little bit better. Instead, though, Carlsen didn't play that, nor did he play the move suggested by Dejan Boykov and Peter Docker's news report analysis. Definitely go check that out, queen to e3. He played the move h4. He still wanted to expose this queen. The problem is this move doesn't take into account just how dangerous the position potentially is for his own king. After g takes h4, queen takes h4, the very principled move by the American, d5. Exclam. Whenever your opponent opens their own king by pushing pawns, you always want to open the center, period. It's the principled approach. And I'll elaborate a little bit further. If these pawns, as you can see, get undermined and they get loose around the king, well, the emperor loses his clothes, and we know that's not a fun night. Now, Carlsen played the move g5, which is a blunder, but I want to point out that had he even played e takes d5, c takes d5, and then guarded the c2 pawn with rook f2, he's still not in an ideal position, still struggling to justify the way he's opened up the king here. We wouldn't want that move, but we wouldn't want to have a position as white where the king is open and forever worried about potential tactics. So that's exactly the kind of position probably Carlsen didn't want, and when he played g5, he might have done it expecting d takes e4, f4, and then the very aggressive move by black, h6. This would have been sharp, but buckle your seatbelts, this gets interesting. If f5 takes, white actually trades queens in a complicated way, but then uses the open files on the king side and improves the knight on a4 by bringing it to d7. This is a position that could be very, very dangerous for black. We're already threatening things that look like checkmate with this knight guarding escape squares and all kinds of weirdness. So it's possible that Carlsen went for this line expecting Nakamura to play the aggressive move h6. But as soon as the black player plays the move e6, we suddenly see what's happening here. The evaluation above me agrees. Black is just totally comfortable here. The emperor has lost his clothes. e6 has prevented the move f5, and there's really not a lot to justify white's attack. It's exactly the kind of move that makes you realize as white you should have played more solidly earlier or played the e5 positional break instead of f3. Now, after c4 and black challenged the d-file, you could say that rook d to e1 is a concession. It does give away the d-file to black and ultimately kind of the writing on the wall. Black uses that d-file for very good means later on. But I'm going to point out he probably can't play chicken or have a staring contest on the d-file either. The move knight to b6 attempts to do that, and these rooks sort of stay in a gridlock. And after rook to b8, if king h2, if black takes on d1, white could get some serious stuff here with a check on the 8th rank followed by taking f6. And black could be in big trouble. The problem is that black has a simple move here if white plays this way. He can push this e3 pawn, just giving it up, looking to sacrifice it, because as soon as this queen gets in here, again, we see this theme that white king was opened from the principled moved d5 that Hikaru played, and black is doing really well here. So it's hard to really criticize Carlsen's move, rook d to e1. Now, after knight to e8, we see that black is going to prevent the move f5, not anymore by putting the knight on f5, but by actually just putting the pawn on f5, exposing the fact that the g5 pawn is pinned, anchoring in this beautiful protected passed pawn on e4, and threatening moves like h6 because the g5 pawn is pinned. The game is not over, but we're getting that way where the d-file combined with threats of h6 opening the king were just going to be too much for Carlsen to hold. We see rook to d6 very nicely. He's going to double and force white to blink first. Threats of the second rank and queen h5 are just too much, although we do have to point out that probably the one mistake Nakamura made in the entire game happens right here. Not with e5. e5 is beautiful. It undermines f4 and g5, prepares the move rook to g6. It's lovely. But right here, there was really no reason for Nakamura to blink first. The move h6 is absolutely crushing. It exposes the g5 pawn. It's pinned. You're going to take it, win it, use the h-file, and there's no counterplay for white. But for some reason, Nakamura played e takes f4. This allowed the queen to get an open diagonal, and suddenly Nakamura realized he couldn't just maybe gobble up this pawn immediately because of the fear of all kinds of checks. He recovers nicely, and the position is still much better for black. As you can see, the engine agrees, but h6 likely would have just been a resigned times for white. E takes f4, giving this diagonal did give Carlsen a little bit of life. So, to Nakamura's credit, he recovered, played a little bit of tickle here, but only took on g5 after he improved the queen's position, and the point is that now these checks can be met by a nice tucking away in this very warm little hole for the king where the queen on h5 keeps him protected from checks, and queen f4 followed by a new improvement, bring the queen to d4, guarding the dark square diagonal so that this king can go back to safety. This leads to a forced series of moves where black is really just pretty easily winning once the checks stop. We can see after knight f3 and queen d6, the engine is already announcing forced checkmates, suggesting things like try to give up the queen on g4 for the rook, and so the world champion threw in the towel. A big game, obviously a very exciting start to the Bilbao Chess Masters Final, a huge win for the American Hikaru Nakamura, and hopefully a educational analysis session here. Leave a comment, let us know what you think of this video format. We're going to be bringing you more topical videos like this as often as we can. Give us a like, give us a share, and let us know how you like this type of analysis. Look for other Grandmasters and International Masters to be analyzing games from the Bilbao Chess Masters Final during the entire tournament. Thanks for watching.